But then the next thing I remember, I was out of my body in the white light. Apparently, I had fallen asleep and driven into a tree. So I was looking down, my body was against the tree like this. The car was so smashed. When I looked at it, I did go back after I got out of the hospital and looked at the car. I was amazed I survived.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we're talking with Dr. Laurence Brock. He's a near-death experiencer. He's had an experience in his life. We're going to dig into how that happened and a bunch of questions that I was mentioning that have come up with me recently. So thank you so much, Laurence, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I generally go into kind of when it happened at this point.
Yeah,
Usually I like to find out a little bit about what was going on in your life at the time. So maybe just a little blueprint of who you were and what you were doing in your life right
yeah.
before the near-death experience.
So I was living in Colorado, in Longmont, Colorado, working in a restaurant, being the second chef in a pretty upscale steak and seafood restaurant. I enjoyed it. I've always liked cooking, and it was definitely the partying lifestyle. Just to give you a glimpse of it, I used to buy these 7-inch Michelob beers and hide them on. So you're working behind this counter, and I could bend over and chug a 7-ounce beer like at work. And we could even smoke joints back then, and it was totally illegal, but those big fans there. But that just gives you a glimpse into my lifestyle. And so my roommate there was a friend of mine from my childhood. I grew up in the Northeast of the United States, and we both had some time off, and we went back to the Northeast to visit our parents. We drove his Datsun 280Z, a really fun fast sports car, the 1,800 miles all the way back, and we found out about a party. And I often say, I don't even can't even imagine how we found out about things back then, because I guess we had to talk to people. It wasn't like texting or online. So I borrowed my mom's Ford Bobcat and went to this party. We were partying and I was drinking. And, in the 1970s, people weren't so careful about drinking and driving, but I did not really think I was too high to drive. Um, but I came up with a plan. I was going to say that I was too high to drive so I could leave my car there and go back and, flirt with the girl who was having the party the next day. The party was very loud, music, people dancing. It wasn't like you could talk to someone. You had to yell for anyone to hear you. So, but so I had my friend drive me back to my parents. Almost all the way there, I remembered my sister needed my mom's car the next day for work. So I told my friend, bring me back to the party. I remember going in, telling the girl I was going to take my car. I remember walking through the crowd to get, it's so vivid in my mind, like I had to push through like this. I don't remember walking out the door. I have some glimpses of walking down the walkway out to my car. But then the next thing I remember, I was out of my body in the white light. Apparently, I had fallen asleep and driven into a tree. So I was looking down, my body was against the tree like this. The car was so smashed. When I looked at it, I did go back after I got out of the hospital and looked at the car. I was amazed I survived. I can't still, again, it's very vivid in my mind, but the car was so smashed on the driver's side that um, the feeling part of it is what I remember the most. So, it was in 1976. I had never heard of a near-death experience. I've had some references of spiritual things, mostly from fictional stuff, but I didn't really know what to think about it at all. But the feeling was like everything was fine, even though I saw my head cracked open, blood, the car smashed. It was just like, oh, this is cool. It's kind of a silly way to put it, but it was more like just everything was okay. It, I did have a feeling that it felt like beautiful summer day, how you can almost feel the air on your skin, kind of like that is what it felt like. And uh, even I start to say it, I get this warmth through the center of my body. Uh, I don't know how long it was because when I tell the story, it's literally a minute. But so behind me, there was a big, it was all white around me. It was dark. It was nighttime where the car was. Behind me, there was a big circle of white with a full length silhouette in there and other, all different shades of white, and then energy radiating off of that silhouette. Uh, then the being in there at the time, I had no concept of what it was at all. It was just here and now. I'm part of this wonderful thing. The voice said, "You have to go back. Your father wants you to stay." I didn't know right in that moment. One of the only thoughts I really had the whole time was the father he was talking about was God, not my physical father.
Okay.
So I went back into my body and I came to 3 days later in the hospital.
Well, thank you for that. I'm going to dig a little deeper into it as and see what
Yeah,
comes to you here, but I really appreciate you sharing that. So you, the first thing that really stuck with me right away is that you were blackout drunk. Let's put it that way. You were
yeah,
completely wasted where, you know, there's kind of that level that some of us have been at, where we think we're okay, we can keep going, but you're not. And so you
yeah.
don't
I
have a
didn't
lot of
really
memory
feel
there.
that way. I think more the thing, part of the reason I don't remember is from the accident and hitting my head. I mean, I wasn't like stumbling. I mean, I remember walking and feeling, but I did fall asleep. So whatever that was, yes,
And do you
I
remember
blacked
getting in
out.
the car?
I don't remember getting in the, well, as you're saying that, the first time I'm getting kind of a glimpse in my mind about it. So
Hmm.
there's some of the things that I, well, definitely walking down the path, I did not remember at all. And then over the years, I've gotten glimpses. And now you're saying that I'm just feeling energy move around and I'm getting an image in my mind. So I wonder if it's kind of coming up to the surface.
Hmm. Yeah, because what hit me was how vivid the experience in the NDE came online, even when
Yeah,
you were in a state in the physical of, whether I wouldn't, whether you're blackout drunk, whether you're whatever, you're not
yeah,
completely,
not very
your
conscious.
awareness here, your consciousness isn't
Yeah,
working correctly in the human form. But you're saying the moment that you died, or the moment that, yeah, you said your head was cracked open and things like that. So you obviously had a experience with the afterlife. But the moment that happened, the memory was it's immediate. Like it was like
oh,
turning on like a TV.
it's like it happened yesterday. I still see it in my mind. I start to feel the energy. So, but as you're saying that, I didn't remember actually leaving my body. The thing I remember, I was just in the white light. There was no tunnel or going from my body to the white light. I was just in the white light.
Okay, and this brings up a very interesting thing because I've spoke to, hundreds of people now who've had these
Yeah,
NDEs, and I haven't concluded this yet. I feel like an NDE researcher in a way because I get to speak with everyone, and I
yeah,
make notes on my tablet, and I compare notes and I compare experiences. And there seems to be this kind of like when we're born, we're in the womb, then we go through the canal of the woman and come out on the other end, and we're here.
yeah,
There's this transitional shift that happens until we're in the physical. And I can't help but notice a lot of similarities in the transition back from the physical to where we come from.
yeah,
And I also am not convinced that a lot of that transition somehow is still tied to our physical uh, consciousness. So, what I
yeah,
mean is like when we're coming out of the body, when that tunnel is emerging, I somehow feel, and I don't know this, I can't confirm it, that we're still tied to this body, whether people
well,
talk about
yeah,
the astral realm with the cord and things like that. There's something still tied in. And the reason I'm saying that is because what you just said. You said that you were just there. So if
yeah,
you were already in this kind of like out of kind of consciousness state,
Yeah.
you might
Yeah.
have still been in that during the process of change. Like we don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not saying you don't, but I'm starting
Yeah.
to feel that way with some people when they mention that because, yeah.
Well, obviously it's some connection because I came back and I'm looking at that. So it is the experience during that time, like it's all one thing. And even as you're saying it, it was me looking that way. I knew there was something behind me, but it wasn't like, oh, maybe I'll just leave kind of thing. It was definitely connected to the physical body.
In the first moment that you realized you had left the physical body, were you looking
Yeah.
down at the scene?
Yes. Yeah. And again, it didn't really register. There were no thoughts really. It was just that everything was a feeling that everything was okay. It wasn't even like I thought, oh, there's my body and damaged. It was
Mhm.
just looking at it and feeling fine. And just, it wasn't this, it was like, it was a joyful thing, but it wasn't like whoopee, like a party or anything. It was very peaceful and things are just the way they're supposed to be.
The environment that was around you when you looked at the body. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to dig into that with some people I'm talking to too.
Okay.
And so what I'm trying to determine is if there's a memory of what it looked like, if did it look like two parallel worlds where you're seeing the light over here and you're looking down there? Did it look like
Yeah.
you could look at two things at once? Like how would you describe what that looked like?
It it really looked like it was white here and it was dark here. And you're asking for thoughts about it, but
Hmm.
um, so I didn't really think of that. It's basically it was that it was white everywhere around me. It was almost like being in a very thick fog, but I could see very clearly. Like that's how the white was. And then down here it was dark. So it felt like knowing everything, but it really there was no need to know anything. See,
Hmm.
when we talk about it from the physical level, it's like we want to try to understand it. There was nothing in me trying to understand it. Just everything was good, how it was supposed to be, and that it was being a part of it as opposed to even looking at it.
Hmm. Well, that makes perfect sense because when we're here in this physical, I think one of the main things that human beings love is to learn, right? Like that's why
Yeah,
we love
that's what
going
our
to
mind does, figures
uni
things out.
Yeah, like some of my favorite years was going to college, university, just sitting there learning, 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 learning. And th there's a reason why we're all wanting to do that, even outside of education. Then we want to keep learning. And then we go through
Yeah,
life experiences and we have to keep learning. Sounds like, you know, when you're here, we're constantly doing that. It seems like when you're on the other side, it's not that there's no need to learn. It's probably just at a different form, but you have a knowingness of everything already, in regards to certain things. So, does that make sense? Like you went from the
yeah,
need
yeah.
to know to knowing.
Right. Well, I mean, even I talk about spiritual unknowing a lot to people because their mind comes in and wants to make it like this. In the spirit, it's like this. So
Hmm.
something comes to mind. I was teaching. So, and I try to convey this to people, especially if they want to connect with past loved ones. They're trying to make the person in the spirit like they were when they were alive, and they're not that way anymore. And I tell people you need to let it go. It's not specific. Sometimes people say, yeah, but sometimes there's very specific information. There is, but that process of letting go of your mind, trying to pin it down, is very important to get things. So I taught this workshop, and this woman, this is her second workshop. She came to me and she she got it. And I just saw her eyes lit up like she let go of the thinking and the mental knowing. And then because she had been saying, I've been trying to contact I don't remember her past loved ones for a long time. And then she got it. And it was her eyes were like wide open, like a kid, like in
Mm,
awe of something like, and she goes, wow, I got information about them. But it was letting go of them needing to have a body, needing them to feel a certain way, even smell a certain way. And it was more like, this is just all love. And then it's like, oh, there it is. So,
mm.
yeah.
Wow. I just wanted to mention this. So it's Dr.
Yeah.
Lawrence Brock. What's your doctorate in? Like what did you
Spiritual science.
Oh, and
So it's
spiritual
very
science.
related to this, yeah.
Yeah, because what I'm trying to think is before the NDE, did you
Yeah.
have, you know, assumptions about who we are from a medical standpoint? Like what are we? Did you have any of these assumptions beforehand, before the
Yeah.
NDE?
Yes. So in my mind, I was in my early 20s. I thought I knew everything, but I did have some spiritual experiences when I was younger. I just kind of ignored them because I didn't even, it's not like I judged myself. And even after my NDE, I knew what happened. I didn't tell many people, but I wasn't thinking I was crazy because I knew it really happened. But it's hard to put into words what you're talking about because people say, were you worried about death? I said, no, I was 22. Like, I thought I was invincible for the rest of my life kind of thing. And now
Mhm.
I'm 71. So now I know that's a little different. So, yes, I had some concepts about that a lot. And it's interesting because, in one way, looking back, I could see everything in my life was moving me in this direction. But some of it was from watching sci-fi. I really loved Star Trek when I was younger, the original Star Trek, and so much of their inclusivity that's in that show and different concepts about how and there are beings from other planets on the show, but it seemed to me obviously they're talking about different aspects of the human, experience. So, but
Hmm.
I read Autobiography of a Yogi when I was in high school, partially because my girlfriend did, and I had some ideas, and so looking back, that not knowing has been such a blessing because I've been in the process of learning all this time. And I still know, even I do know, and I can put it into words, but the words pale in comparison to the experience. So it's always like, and if you get stuck and I know this and I want that experience again, there's something greater. And that tricky part right there is such an important part of the spiritual process.
I love that. You mentioned that you took a while to tell people, right? So you
Yeah.
took it. Did you quietly, was it like did you quietly change your assumptions of who you are? Like, did it just kind of right overnight, you come back, you're like, wow, like there's something else? Or was this like, okay,
Yeah.
wow, maybe something goes on after our heart stops, like, or did you have
Yeah.
like, because we have assumptions of like the way that life is, especially if you look at it from a scientific place. Some people
Yeah,
get
yeah,
stuck in
yeah.
that. So did it kind of slowly emerge out of that, or was this something that right away you're like, I'm a changed man? I'm like right away.
No, it didn't. Well, no. I again, so I mentioned it to a few people in the beginning. At some point, I mentioned it to someone, and they had a very negative reaction.
Mm,
And again, it was kind of like, okay, this cool thing happened, and I have to get back to work. I mean, that's basically what it was. But something happened. I was sitting in, so I went back out to Colorado, worked in the restaurant for a while, but had become not that fulfilling. And after this, it was less fulfilling. And I had applied to go to school in Boulder at the University of Colorado. And then my mom kind of bribed me to move back to the Northeast and work in my dad's electrical contracting company, which made sense because I grew up in it. My grandfather, my uncles, everyone was in that business. And one day I was sitting in my apartment and this woman showed up. She said, I'm the sister of your friend from Colorado. And her sister happened to be someone I did mention my experience to, not really even knowing what to say about it. But she said right away, I know someone who teaches about what happens after we die, and I want to introduce you to him. Like she came in and said, my sister told me interesting things about you, and I'm going to introduce you to this teacher. And she
wow.
did. And once I started interacting with him and listening to him, talk to me directly and also in classes I took with him, that's when I started to have some mental understanding about what happened.
I've always wondered about that because I have people who will tell me they've had this near-death experience. And it's sometimes I don't, it's just unbelievable, right? The experience.
Yeah.
And then they come back and they try to go back to their life. They try to just like pretend it didn't happen. It's something that was there. And I go, well, does that mean it feels kind of dreamlike if you're able to just
Yeah.
kind of like turn it off? Or is it more that it's just like you're scared of how what people are gonna think about you? Like I always wonder about
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I think there was definitely some of that because some people I told that were my friends never wanted to see me again. So,
Wow.
but I don't think that was any more than normal life for me. Just, revealing your inner self to people, especially as a man, is something you're taught not to do growing
Hmm.
up.
Right.
So it didn't really stand out. It's just like, okay, there's another part of me I'm not sharing with people. And like I keep saying, get back to work, make a living, and you know, um, but so it's kind of cool that this woman just showed up at my door and I spent like 10 years studying with him. But when he started to talk to me, I mean, he right away he started calling me a sensitive, which I knew was a good thing because he had written a book and that's what his teacher called him. So, and he knew how to do some really amazing spiritual healing stuff. And he taught me how to start using that. So when I came back, my hands would become very warm when I touch people. And again, I didn't even think, oh, healing abilities. It kind of felt natural, like it was a healing thing. But again, in my mind, like nowadays, people hear that, they go, oh, healing abilities. And, I wasn't even thinking that way at all. But I learned a lot from this guy, and that's how I start to be on the spiritual path. And it's kind of like my life. Sometimes I say if I was paying attention, I wouldn't have had to have my head cracked open to, kind of get with the spiritual program, basically.
Hmm.
I'm
I
kind of
was,
naive inside about it
yeah.
still, to tell you the truth. I'm very kind of innocent. It's kind of cool that people are way more open to it now. I'm watching NCIS, and there's one where the main character gets shot, and they show him going through and visiting all the people in his life, like in the spirit. And this is a
Wow.
mainstream TV show. It ended up he didn't die, but he came back a different person. So he had a near-death experience in that main network TV show. It's kind of
Right.
cool. So everyone knows about it. It's way more open. It's
And they
great.
probably didn't continue on to poke fun at it. That's the other difference is it's kind
Not
of
at
like
all.
right. It's because it's so out there now. I mean,
Yeah,
there's so many people having different experiences. And like, science has improved even more. We resuscitate people a lot easier than we used to. So people are having more of these experiences
yeah,
for whatever reason. And I was going to say too, there's probably an aspect of coming back from an experience like that we're not meant to hold on to, right? So I wouldn't
yeah,
assume that God would want to send us back and have us, completely being just fixated on this experience because
yeah,
then you can't realign back in this physical world, I would assume.
yeah. Yeah, I think uh, I remember hearing someone say something like, yeah, you can never really get to see what it's like in the spirit totally, or you'd just not want to, totally not want to be here. There's enough of that already. But
Right.
and see, I say that I've learned how to meditate I mean, I practice, I meditate every day. I practice as part of connecting. And right then, something in me opened up, and it's like, ah, there's that feeling. So, and then it's like, yeah, then I have to try harder to even listen to you because in one way it's like, oh, that doesn't matter anymore. And that's kind of what it was like in the near-death experience. All these things, they just didn't matter.
Right. You're speaking about shows. I just watched a show with my fiance called, it's brand new. It's called Pluribus. I think it's what it's called. And it's on
Yeah.
Apple, I believe. And the concept, I don't want to spoil it for anyone. So if anyone wants to watch that show, well, don't turn off, but I'll give it away without giving it away. But there's this concept of us, all being one. Okay.
Yeah.
And in this physical world, that concept just doesn't work. And you see that in the show. It just becomes, um, I don't know how to explain it, but it almost becomes, I don't want to say the word pointless, but there's kind of this pointless feeling
Yeah.
that emerges through the show. So it's a really fascinating show, and I was hooked on it. But I wanted to ask you about this light you saw. So you had this ball of light, and you
Yes.
said you saw a being of light that said you have to go
Yeah.
back. The father wants you to go back, or your father wants you to go back.
Yeah.
What, and you've probably been asked this before, but if you, like, is there any way to describe, was the being, did it have a face? Was it just light? Like what, if you were to describe what you saw, what did it actually look like?
It was just light. It was like a silhouette where there was no features or anything. And so, but when the teacher start first, he talked to me about Mary and how open she was to God's love. And then it's just like, oh, that's what I experienced. I was just so open to God's love, without my physical body, without my ego. I was like, oh, this is all love. And then he started to talk about Jesus. And that's when, even now, I said, like, something in my energy just goes there and go, oh, yeah, that's Jesus. So, is there any way to prove that? There's no way. But inside of me, that's so true. And through any of the prophets, there is a great kind of path to God and a connection to God. So whatever your religious beliefs might be, there are the beings in spirit that help us do that, and they're there to help us. So,
Mhm.
um, but I was from a Jewish family. The teacher was actually Islamic, so it was kind of like
Wow.
interesting in that way. But
Mhm.
when I say that, I could think of it interesting. But when I think of the experience, it's just like this is all love.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, I mean, I don't know about you, but I have my own religion as well that I
Yeah.
am part of. But when I look at it all, I remember when I was younger, if it ever asked me my religion, I'd put we're all one. And everybody,
Yeah.
and then they'd say, what do you mean? Like what does that even mean? And
Right.
it's because the concept of it is it has each religion has its own um, ties to things, but
Yeah.
they seem to all circle back to the same concepts for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think we have to realize that, and just respect that each religion has different things. But something came to me while you were talking there, and it
Yeah.
was I had mentioned before we started recording today that I had recently lost somebody. And so, in thoughts and feelings and questions start to come to us, especially when we have the loss of a physical person in our lives.
Yeah.
This is an odd one. I don't want to say it's an odd question, but I've never asked it on my show before. But I started thinking about, and you may or may not know this. I just want to know your insight on it.
Yeah.
There's this concept of a lot of NDEers I've talked to when they pass, they go to the other side. They look back at their body and they're like, "Meh, good riddance, see you later." There's kind of this non-connection to the physical that can happen. And they look
Yeah.
to the light and they go to the light and they do their thing and all these things happen. Um, when we're here and we lose someone close to us, we miss
Yeah.
them. We miss
Yeah.
them. And I think I'm speaking for myself, so this could be a bit of a selfish question, but from myself, when I lose someone, I want to think that they're still present in my life in some sense, meaning they're still aware of who
Yeah.
Joe is and what I'm doing and that I have them in my life still. So I get this feeling like, oh, I miss this person and I hope that they're around and I hope they can see, my kids that I just had and I hope they can be part of my life still. And there's this, and it makes me feel
Yeah.
good as a human. I'm like, okay, I feel good. But then on the other side of it, the ND ear will say, well, I didn't really care.
Yeah.
And
I didn't. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't I'm curious what your feelings are around that if you think that there still is some kind of connection from spirit to us in any
Yeah.
way.
I think there is. I think it's a little different. So some things come to mind. One is when my mom passed away. So I was in my mid 30s. So I hadn't quite developed my abilities and awarenesses as much, but I had a lot of awarenesses compared to a lot of people. And it was I remember very clearly being in the limo for her funeral, and one minute I was laughing because the spiritual part's so joyful. The next second I was crying because I missed her already.
Mhm.
And I think that still goes on. I think the connection, well, like I said, if you want to connect, and you can, because the person you're asking about is around you, but you got to let go a lot of the physical restrictions you put on it. And it is more like think of their positive qualities and attributes, and it comes in there. At some point, that people kind of usually kind of come become part of a almost like a group of other souls working on the same thing. But still, it just makes so I saw my passed away grandfather before my NDE. I mean, and it was definitely him. He was a unique looking person. I was in the movies. I was sitting in the side. He was sitting in the front center. And I walked around because it looked so much like him from the back, and it was him. I didn't say anything. I get being kind of naive, but now he comes to me now, but he looks like this very bright yellow light. So back then, I mean, he looked as physical as a physical person. Like
Wow.
if I saw him and not knowing who he was, I wouldn't have known. But now he comes kind of as this bright yellow light. There's somewhat similar features on his face. It just feels the same to me. So that I think it is, but it's not as concrete as
Mhm.
we would like it to be. But I think generally people. One time I was working with someone and their past husband came and put his hand right on her heart center and she felt it. It
Mm.
was really cool.
Okay, so what
Yeah.
I'm getting from you is that they are still present in our life, and what could be happening in my mind is I'm
Yeah.
talking to people who are witnessing their first experience leaving the body. And that is
Yeah.
probably a little bit of a shock, right? At first, because they're kind of now out of their body, they're realizing
Yeah.
what they held on to in the material world no longer really matters, whether it's a big
Yeah.
fancy
Yeah.
mansion and a nice car and them, and even to their families, though. And that's why I'm saying the physical family itself, it's like I
Yeah.
miss them, I love them, but I'm not held down to them. I'm going to go this way. And that's what would upset me. I'd say, how dare them? They should be completely, why would they want to separate themselves
Yeah.
from their family? But possibly as they transition, there's more of an understanding of their connection to the souls of these bodies, and they probably stay connected that way. I don't know. That's just the way I'm thinking it.
Well, I think part of us really identifies with the physical level. That's the struggles with it. So when I do, I mean, I've been really blessed to meet amazing people, and that so in the beginning, my near-death experience was just the beginning. So, and
Mhm.
sometimes I even think like, wow, what I'm experiencing now is so much more. But there are times when I'm very caught up in the physical level, and then so when you almost have to perceive it as the physical and spiritual are separate, because you can't imagine how they're together. But it is kind of, well, I'm meditating and it's back and forth, physical, spiritual, physical, and then it goes like this, whoosh, and that swishing is kind of how it feels, and then it's open up. And like I said, when I thought of it, my heart opened up. It's like, well, these things on the physical don't matter all that much. But I saw one of my teachers who I really respected a lot and considered probably the most spiritual person I ever met talk about his mother passing away and starting to cry. And he just said, I miss her so much on the physical level, even though, and uh, so recently, one of my friends from childhood, it was their birthday, and on Facebook, I sent a happy birthday. And then one of our other friends right away said, Happy Heaven birthday. And then I
Mhm.
realized, oh, did this person pass away? And they did a few months ago. But he was, there have been other people my age that have passed away, but this is someone I was pretty close to for years in my life. So it had a different perspective. And as you're talking, I realized, oh, I can connect to this person in the spirit. I wasn't even thinking of that because I was, kind of upset and, you know, checking my own mortality and things like that. But that physical part really draws us. And then can we
Mhm.
step back some of the time and go, God is good, basically.
So because there's spirit within us that our friends, family members, the people who've passed before us, they would still be connected to our spirit. And so in that sense, they're still connected to us. Like they're
Yeah.
not essentially connected to Joe, the physical being. They might check in, but
Yeah.
it's probably, because I'm thinking from a physical place because I'm
Yeah.
here
Yeah. Of
and this is
course.
where I'm stuck in. So I'm thinking of it
Yeah.
that way. And that
Yeah.
could be what's happening when I'm having these moments of thought of, oh, poor me. I wish that my past, they'd come and visit. I did when I had a best friend years ago pass, and it was
Yeah.
very hard. And she came to me in a dream and connected with me the same way we were connected by Audible because we only talked through the phone
Yeah.
basically. And so she came to me that way. But it
Yeah.
was this feeling of, hey, this didn't have to happen. This wasn't even supposed to happen, but you're really struggling. So I wanted to tell you I'm okay. Like, but you need to
Yeah.
live your life now. You need to move on. It was this feeling of, hey, cut it out, move on kind of thing. And but it was very not in a mean way, but very like in a lovingly strict way. But it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, stay. And I was begging her to stay, but she's like, no, I can't, I'm not even supposed to be doing this. But so there
That's
was a
cool. Yeah.
connection in a physical way, but it
Yeah.
was my dream. So I don't know.
I think that's because so I sometimes I can help like facilitate that for people. And sometimes people are there like it's almost like in the spirit, they don't understand how come the person's upset because it's far away from where they're at. But there are times they come and help. I mean, it depends. So we have karma and karma is really like what are we learning? But in the spirit, we have what are we learning too? So there's certain beings that help us more. That's more their thing to help us. But yes, so it is more open your heart and think of their very positive qualities. And that's probably more of what their expression is right then. And
Mhm.
sometimes you can feel it physically. So um, I've had other times where people feel, I mean, this being came down and did this, and she said, "Oh, I just felt something." So that was
Wow.
really cool. And that happens other times. So,
And are you doing that through? So you mentioned a few times here you do this with
yeah.
other people. This is through the work you do? Like, is this like
Yes.
could you
Yeah.
explain a little bit about that?
Yes, so I work almost always on Zoom. Once in a while, I see people in person, not that much these days. Basically, I say a prayer in the beginning, asking for God's love and light, and I get to see a lot of cool things. Some of it is the energy that I felt in my hand that right after, I mean, that's something I noticed was definitely different in me, the energy in my hands. After my NDE, I kind of know how to hold that around people wherever they are in the world. And within that, there's a certain healing that takes place. I got a great testimonial just the other day of someone who was, I think they had like 8 sessions with me, but it was a while ago, and they're writing a book and they wrote this testimonial in there saying something it so he had his back and legs were hurting him for years and he got better and he said something like it's not just healing, it's life changing. So it was just so nice to hear. So there's part of it of holding the energy there. There is part of it that I'll say it in kind of a sarcastic way. I have no idea what's going on, but I try to follow. So it is kind of hold my mind back and observe what's happening. So sometimes people ask, um, years ago, someone was coming to me and their brother committed suicide. And I had picked up something beforehand and I said, you should have your brother talk to me. And they ended up not doing it. And then he committed suicide. And then shortly after that, the passed away brother came and said, tell him I'm totally fine. And he looked totally fine. And it was
Wow.
basically he was here to learn about that experience of being depressed. And, he was like in a school learning about that. And um, a lot of times it's like that. Sometimes people they pass away and it's almost like they don't realize they're passed away and
Hmm.
they're almost in a cycle of doing something they were connected to. But there's ways to help those people. And it's, yeah, you can see I get very excited about it. And it
Yeah.
is like
Yeah.
this such amazing thing to me, when someone heals on the physical level, then it's like proof. The
Hmm.
other things are kind of, well, maybe they're just feeling better, but
Hmm.
yeah,
No, I can understand. I've worked with some people now in a spiritual sense a little bit here, not as the
yeah,
same sense that you do, but I also do music coaching, and it comes up during
yeah,
those coaching sessions, and then just during spiritual life coaching, things like that. But I can relate to what you said. It was funny when you said you have no idea what's going on because as a songwriter when I was younger, I was writing songs and I wasn't writing songs about trucks and girls and I was nothing against that. That's entertaining and stuff,
Yeah,
but I was pulling from something that I didn't get. And what would happen is people would say, "Wow, Joe, you're only, 16, 15, 20,
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
age I was. How are you writing like that? Like how do you write like that?" And I'd be like, I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I say it and then I listen back and I go, oh wow. And then as
right.
I wrote over the years, a lot of the things I would say would come to fruition. It was like I was writing uh, prolifically, or I don't know what that's the right word. Probably saying the wrong word. Like almost like psychically predicting things. And
Yeah,
then now going full circle, I coach people and they say, well, how do I write like you? And I'm like, well, do you want to learn to write or do you want to learn to write like me? Because those are two
yeah,
different
yeah,
things. So if you want to learn to write like me, this is going to be a spiritual session as well.
right.
So it because
And
it's
it's yeah, yeah.
so you're
That's it.
probably doing, and I wanted to relate to you because
Yeah,
when you're
very
doing
much.
that work,
I mean, music is one of the closest things. So, and surprisingly for me, math is very much like that because I was always kind of, I love music, first of all, because it is like that.
Mhm.
But I also love math. So, and some people say music and math are the same
Well,
kind of thing,
they are.
So,
I mean, music is very mathematical. I mean,
yeah,
there's bars and there's four beats per bar and like everything kind of starts to stem and make sense. And
yeah,
if something's
cool.
off, it doesn't feel as good. And we talk about that with students. And so so with the stuff work you have like a website? Do you have like a main website where people can connect with
Yeah,
you?
lawrencebrock.com, out Lawrence with a U, like I told you.
Hmm.
Yeah, and there's ways there's links to my YouTube, there's ways to make appointments. I've actually, since the last couple of years, I wrote a few books, which is kind of nice too,
Oh, have
that
you?
yeah.
What's the name of the book?
I have three books. The first one was basically a kind of a simplified version of my doctoral treatise called An Air of Well-Being. It's about a breathing technique. And then the book that tells my story of my near-death experience and the first 10 years of my journey is called Autobiography of a Healer,
Oh, nice.
Near-Death Experience to the Power of Love.
What I'll do is I'll make sure those are in the show notes. People can see
Okay.
because
Yeah, I'll
that'll probably
send
go
you
into
it.
more detail too, right? And you said there was
Yeah,
three?
yes. And that, yeah, the other one just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of focused on the meditation and the some clearing exercises and stuff I recommend. But there's a few chapters of, just writing about myself and my story, my philosophy, and
Hmm.
I do like to include the things when something happens on the physical level because it is. So what did I? Oh, yeah. Sometimes I work with people about businesses, and someone was asking me about some process like the red tape was really slowing things down, and they asked me about it, and I did what I do, and I said it looks to me like it's really cleared up, and I'd like to know if that means it's going to happen because sometimes I see that things line up spiritually. The physical level still takes a while, but he contacted me a few days later and said, I can't believe it.
Oh,
The
wow.
permit went through, the inspector, the
Ah,
building thing. So it's like, that was so cool. So, yeah,
wow. That's neat. And I bet how old were you again when you had this NDE?
22.
So 22 until now. The interesting thing that I feel, and I feel this with my own spiritual experiences I've had. I haven't had an
Yeah,
NDE, but you different parts of those experiences come online as you discuss them. I've noticed that. I've had NDE or people that I interview and they say, "Wow, you mentioned this," and then
like it
it's like,
opens up
yeah, it
inside. Yeah,
opens up
yeah,
that part that was just kind of
yeah,
like sitting stagnant. So, you probably, like you said, you wrote these books. As you're writing, I could assume things are coming back to you. I can just see it,
yeah.
right?
Things
Like,
I hadn't thought about it. No,
hmm.
it was great. And so I've been doing TikTok live and some of it is reading it. And one of the cool things about it is when I was a kid in school, I could barely pass writing or English classes.
Mm.
And now I read my books and people say it's so well written. Partially that's because I'm so careful. about it. But
Right.
I read some things, I think, wow, that was really well put. Like, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and you think, where did that come from? That's what I do with my
Exactly.
music because I go, did I said that? Or I'll have a really good line.
Well,
I'm like, I have no
your
idea what.
process of
Yeah,
music is it where you study enough to have the foundation, but then you really have to let go. But you have that
absolutely.
foundation and you built that real solid. So in one way, almost when you can't really think, you know it well enough to, oh yeah, there's notes that go with that, and you
Hmm.
might, so. But in doing the healing work, it's very much like that, where you really let go and allow the person's path to be the priority. Which, in one way, I mean, I can see a lot about people, but it's always important to know I don't know everything about this person. I
Hmm.
think it's also important to do that in a relationship to realize you can never see something 100% from someone's point of view and to trust their process. So
Hmm.
I do couples counseling, and that's a really big part of it. But when I'm working with someone, see, you're talking about the music, you're really connecting really nicely. And you kind of know that, but you almost don't label it as spiritual as it really is.
No, I know. I've actually had a few near-death experience guests kind of give me a little loving lecture because,
Yeah.
we'd get in the conversation after the conversation and I'd say, like I feel driven into more spiritual work. And they're like, you're already doing that. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's what you've been doing. And that's in there. Like, yeah, but I want more people. And okay, we'll keep pushing it, but it's part of who
Yeah.
you are, it's like,
Yeah.
and with the way you say, you were talking about how things just come natural. My claim to fame is one of my songs got put on the Olympics in 2018, and the
Oh,
song is
wow.
called Rebels and Warriors. And that song, I was working with students, and then I had to go have my lunch, and I'm walking in to eat my lunch, and I hear in my head Rebels and Warriors, and I hear the hook, and I'm not
Yeah.
really knowing what I'm doing, and I go and I'm eating, and it's still sticking. So instead of coming back to the studio and getting back to some other kind of work, I went, well, this has to be a song because it just keeps hitting me. Da, da, da,
Yeah.
da, da.
Yeah.
Thought nothing of it. A year later, it's played internationally. And I was like,
Yeah.
how did
Wow.
that happen? Because I'll sit
Right.
and try to write the hit song and it's never heard. But that song that was just in my brain from wherever
Right.
it
Well,
came
you
from.
think about like Paul McCartney, man, he just came out with, I mean, he says he still doesn't know how to read music. Just, he's like something. Right. That process is like, how do you get your mind out of the way? But then you kind of got to be disciplined. Some artists or musician, and you got to practice every day. So
Hmm.
again, to build that foundation, and then how can you let go in your mind thinking you know? And it's kind of harsh, but it is like you have to realize you don't know anything to
Right.
open it up. But it's really just a way to open up, like, then because in doing that, then you can know something outside of what you know. So if
Hmm.
you're going like this and it's like, no, it's this, and it's this amazing thing.
It really is the process of letting go. And
Yeah,
I think that can happen with age as well. You get to
yeah,
different decades of your age, your 20s and your 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Each decade, you're kind of just letting, you should be at least. That's why I think we're
yeah,
here. Some of us, I'm sure a lot of us can know an 80-year-old that still acts like they're 12, but there's aspects of them they're probably trying to work through. And
yeah.
but no, this has been
Well,
amazing.
it's also when you get to be a certain age, it's okay to act like you're 12 years old. Like people are
That's right.
just fine with it.
That's right. You got to again probably letting go of what we're supposed to be like. I
Yeah,
totally agree.
exactly.
And something I forgot to ask before when we were talking about the NDE was there was
Yeah.
no life review, right? You didn't have any life review or anything
I
like
did
that.
not have that in the way people talk about it. Again, it just seemed like everything, even in my life, was good. And something interesting happened when I did my schooling for my doctorate, the instructions were look at your life and find something that works for you or that works, something like that. And then you make that into your thing. Like, if I do this, then this happened. And you have to do research and everything. But I knew they were talking about looking at my life right then, but I decided to look at my whole life, and which was a very interesting process. Something that kind of cool happened was my dad contacted me during that time. First of all, for him to ever call me was like I don't even remember the time before that he ever called me, but he called and said, "Oh, I'm interested in what you're doing." And I literally thought, like, did some alien take over my dad's body or something?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, sometimes can be sarcastic, but I also knew I was doing that work to embrace and accept and incorporate my life path from the time I was born to that time. And I try to do that now, but just on the perfect timing, he reached out. So, like, part of it was my dad was not always such a nice guy. Definitely, he would do things that would be considered abusive in this day
Mm.
and age. So, but it was kind of nice that he reached out, and it just seemed, in honoring him in the way I did, he just contacted me right at the perfect time. So it's great.
No, that's lovely. And I was gonna say, probably a lot of people, even if they don't have a life review during their NDE, coming back, having the experience,
Yeah,
I would assume would start to have them reassess their life and almost having a life review. It might just be a slower process, looking over the things in their lives, what matters to
yeah,
them. Does that make sense? So I think
yeah.
essentially
Well,
you probably get a life review no matter what, whether you had it in the non-physical or in the physical.
no, even when you said that, I'm always having a life review. It's like, always like, how can I be in my loving in relation to this? And some of it is, well, I can be in my loving and set boundaries. I can
Hmm.
be in my loving, and it's just easier to do that when I'm not around that person. But sometimes it is, you have to be around that person to learn. So
Hmm.
it's, it is, it is like living in a life review, I would say. That's more of what it's like for me.
Just a few last questions. I was going to ask
Yeah.
you, did you have a fear of death or anything before the NDE?
I didn't, but like I said, I was, in my early 20s, so it wasn't something I really thought about. But now, I mean, I don't want to suffer in the process, but I know when my dad passed away a few years ago, he passed away when he was 92. Until he was like 91 and a half, he was so healthy. And well, looking back, there were some signs, but you would have guessed he was 70, and he still
Hmm.
played tennis till he was like 90. And, um, but he, for, he lost his voice and then he had trouble moving and he was really suffering for a few months. And when he passed away, again, I'm blessed I could see it. He was like flying around like this in the sky. And it just reminded me of a little kid just running around with so much energy, because and he was so happy to have passed away. And it was kind of cool because so part of what happened when he reached out to me, he met this woman and they were so in love in his early 80s. And he must have looked me up online and he asked me about my near-death experience. He didn't, and he was very sharp, but it's not, but um, so it was kind of a segue where I could start to talk to him about some things. And my feeling was, and as far as I know and what I perceive, my mom, who passed away in like 1988, was there to meet him.
Mm.
And I talked to him about that, and it was kind of cool. And, I know that gave him and he couldn't talk. And one time I was there, he took my hand and kissed it, like to express but it
Hmm.
and it's took up some process because like I said, my dad was kind of a mean guy growing up, not to anyone else, but to me. It was funny because to me and one of my sisters, had another brother and sister, he was always so nice and loving to them. So,
That's
but he did
interesting.
come back in kind of a short way, say, "Oh, I'm sorry for not being so nice to you."
Right.
And at the time I just accepted it, but then afterwards I'm thinking, not so nice to me, you were like so mean.
You were terrible. Yeah.
Right. But
And
when connected into the spirit, everything seems so much better. Yeah.
right. I was gonna say a lot. I get told that a lot when they're over there and they look at their life problems. Sometimes they're like, no, it's not as big of a deal. But when they're in
Yeah.
here, it's like it's a big deal, and it's
There's something pulling us on. It's our ego and our personality
mhm.
that our ego is addicted to the drama here. It's like
Right.
how it's meant to be.
So I'm assuming you don't have a fear of death at this point in regards to like
No, I
what
don't. I'm not
happens to our
afraid of
phys
being
to our
die of being dead. Yeah,
right,
I'm
right,
not afraid of the afterlife at all. It
right.
it is like a party. It is like everything's really good. I mean, there's work to do. It is like going back to school, and
Hmm.
you look. then you have a serious life review where you look at every second and see, you know, what you need to study in the next. So maybe within the last year that I was working with this person who had a stroke, and it was interesting because so beings come in to help when I'm healing, but this time there was this guy who came in and he was just observing this woman being sick, and he was just there to learn about it. It was interesting. I felt a little bad because I thought, oh no, does that mean she's not going to get better? But he didn't say anything to me about that. He was just observing. Then after a while, he left, and then there were these three. It was women, but they kind of looked angelic, and but they were there to observe her getting better. So I took that as a good sign. And she did go from hardly being able to talk, and she was able to. She needed help, but she could get outside and everything. So, but just the you're talking about what so we're here to learn and our soul is here to learn, but our soul goes back to learning when we pass away. It
Right.
is like going in, having a postgraduate degree kind of thing. So,
But in a sense, the way you just described that, because my last question I was going to ask you, and we can tie this
yeah,
into it, was going to be, what are we here for? Like, what's the purpose of
yeah,
being here? But in the same sense, it seems like our spirit on the other side, and I've heard of this before, where people will be going through an NDE or they're not quite passed over, but they wake and they see spirit around them, healing
yeah,
them or things, meaning there's something else going on the other side too, whether we're working on the other side doing different things. Uh,
yeah,
and so we still continue to evolve and grow on the other side. But I
yes,
guess the main question is, why do we come here in this physical and go put ourselves through this if we can
yeah.
still do all that on the other side? Or is it all kind of part of one
Well,
thing?
it's lent because on the physical, it's set up we can be on all these different levels, and there's certain in one way because everything in the spirit, just everything's good. So it just to go through these experiences of I mean so in the I studied the Islamic religion some and they have this thing la ilaha illallah, which means there's no god but God. And in one way, and there's volumes written about this, but in one way that is our human experience. So it's learning what's not God and learning what is God, and to know in
Mhm.
one way that we are part of God. Yeah,
Wow. Okay. So it's like perspective. So a part of even
yeah,
having even part of this purpose being here is to have the perspective of, when we're, um, I don't know how you just said it perfectly. I'm trying to reassess what
yeah,
you
yeah.
said, but
I
so
I have that feeling a lot when I talk. Like, wow, that sounded so good,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
don't remember what I said.
Yeah, like we're obviously always part of God,
Yes.
but there is a feeling of separateness here that just
Yeah.
happens naturally being a human. And it's
Yeah.
almost like we come here and we feel completely separate, especially as a baby. I have a little six
Yeah.
month old right now. She some days looks like completely has the fear of everything. Like, what am I doing
Yeah.
here? Why did I sign up for this? And so you start that way, and through your life, it probably part of the process is to come back to God, right? To come back to that
Yeah. Yeah.
oneness that we are on the
Well,
other
she
side.
probably has more awareness of that togetherness than either of us do. So that kind of
Right.
stays there more young. But it is like the physical level has this pull that we've
Hmm.
kind of agreed to. Yeah, something else comes up. Sometimes I just know I passed the test, and I think a lot like how much would I've had to mess it up to not pass. So it is just like getting through it without, you don't have to do that great, but you get through it. So on the experiential level, you learn something, and you don't need to necessarily know what it is.
Wow.
Yeah,
I love that. For anyone who's tuned in this long, I was mentioning you were one of the first NDEers I had on the show
yeah,
2 years ago when this show started. And I was really excited to hear that, we could have you back on and to go over the experience in more detail, because it's definitely
yeah,
more detail this time around too. But yeah, this was a really nice conversation. And again, I know the other thing that happens to me is I'll get off the conversation and a whole bunch of other questions will come
oh,
up.
I wish I thought of that. Right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, if anything, sometimes I throw that in the chat or in the comments. But for any of the people listening, if you have any questions, I'm sure they can leave questions and you'd be happy
Yeah,
to
I
answer any of
I
those.
try to check on there. But yeah, in one way, there's no way to describe what we're talking about with words. So there's the spirit. And like I said, there are times, and I could see you, there are times your energy just opened up, and that's kind of more of what it is. And it just like, so there's part of the spiritual work that feels very lonely because you're doing it all to yourself and you can't let people around you interfere. Like I say, don't let them mess with your game, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And then it's like, but then you do it and there's something that opens up. And then it's like, oh, I remember now what it's like. And you don't always remember that. So that's,
Yeah.
but yes, the music is good. So one other thing popped in. My daughter does interviews and she got to interview Ron Carter, the jazz bass player.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
he's like 88 and he's still playing. But she asked him, like, what do you do? Because he has to be a band leader and then be jamming. Like, and she said, how do you do that? You like, there's one part of it so mental, part of it so spiritual in a certain way. And he said, on a day that I'm going to perform, I don't listen to any music all day. Like that's
Mm.
part of his thing. So he can get in that place of being open without having any preconceived ideas in his mind about what the music should be, basically. It's pretty
Wow.
quite profound.
I can kind of attest to that. I've drove to shows and I have to turn the music off and
Yeah,
to get into my space. Sometimes I'll put my own music on is I never listen to my own music, but in that space I would because I'm aligning into my own energy.
yeah,
But other
yeah.
than
That's
that,
good.
I completely agree and I can totally uh
Well, as you're
yeah.
saying that, you have some interesting beings in spirit helping you there
Mm,
to do that. That's kind of cool. So I think your thing of you listening to your music is really good because it helped you line up with that thing in spirit.
hmm.
And in one way, people who make this great music are lining up with spirit, but it's a little different for each person. So
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you so much for the conversation, Lawrence. It's been
You're welcome.
amazing. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. I always turn to the audience, say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired. That's why we're doing this. And it's kind of like what you said, Lawrence, that talking about an experience that's it's very difficult to talk about it because it's hard to even describe in words. And you're
Yeah,
doing your best to describe in words. I'm doing my best to ask questions about the experience in words. But I think we're getting there, and I'm seeing
yeah, yeah.
humanity kind of get to a place where we're understanding and accepting it so much more. And it's because of
So
people like
much
you that
more.
come on
Yeah.
and talk about them. So I really do appreciate coming on and talking
Thank you.
about it.
It's great. Yeah, it's great you're doing this. I love music. I see all your instruments there. I do think the process of music and spiritualness are basically the same thing. So it's good.
So vision. So